Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm talking about 7 self-defeating behaviors that people who experience childhood trauma exhibit, display, whichever word. We know that when we experience childhood trauma, that there are coping mechanisms that we develop that many times we have to unlearn. And so I'm going to talk about 7 self-defeating behaviors that you may recognize and you need to unlearn. And I'm going to talk about how to heal them. What's the best way? So what are the self-defeating behaviors? They are self-defeating thoughts and negative views that we have of ourselves. And those behaviors are behaviors that we develop that reinforce those thoughts. So what are some of the negative things that we think about ourselves? Sometimes self-defeating thoughts are thoughts of low self-esteem, low self-worth, and we develop behaviors. People who experience trauma develop behaviors to reinforce those view of self. I'm not good enough views of self. Now, that's not what we want. That's not the outcome that people who experience childhood trauma desire. But because the thoughts are so powerful, behaviors are developed to maintain those thoughts. And so when we are working with that, what we do is we address the thoughts. We help people to identify those thoughts and begin to change them so that the behaviors can change. So what are the results of self-defeating behaviors? So the result of the behavior is not what people desire when you develop self-defeating behaviors, but there's a pattern that is continuously repeated. So there's a pattern that's continuously repeated that reinforces the behavior. But of course, that's not the result that is wanting. If I have low self-esteem, then I don't want to develop anything that's going to reinforce that low self-esteem. I want to do things that's going to make it better. So number one is mind reading. People who experience childhood trauma sometimes develop what we call cognitive distortions. And there's mind reading. And in mind reading, I think I know what you're thinking. And you think you know what other people are thinking by the way they look, by their body language, and different things. We can't ever know what anybody's thinking. We only know what we're thinking. And so when somebody comes to me and we're working on mind reading, for me is, so how do you think about yourself? Because often the mind reading will result in thinking people have negative views of us. And so I always check in with, so how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about you? And when you want to stop mind reading, you have to think, when I think people are thinking negative things about me, always check in with how you think about yourself, because oftentimes that's the place where you need to start. Because as I've said, the self-esteem needs fixing. I'm trying to fix my camera. The self-esteem needs fixing, right? Number two is minimizing the positives. So the positives are minimized. The positives are disqualified. They're not taken into account. When somebody gives you a compliment or anything that's positive in your life, you brush it off because it's too uncomfortable and you can't allow yourself to dwell on it. So that's one self-defeating behavior. Try to lean into something that's positive and allow it to to be with it and allow it to enjoy the feeling so that you can repeat that behavior. People with another self-defeating behavior, number three, is maximizing the negatives. So the positives are minimized and the negatives are maximized, because that is more in line with how you think about yourself, because of those distortions and because of the low self-esteem. And number four is must statements. There are lots of must statements. You must do things. Your family must do things. Your employer must do things. Everybody must do this thing in order for you to feel a certain way. And we know that nobody must do anything. The world don't have to do anything. Your family don't have to do anything. Your boss don't have to do anything. People don't have to do anything for you to do anything. You can change. You can grow. You can make decisions. You can be good. You can be great. You don't must, but you would like to. And there's a difference. I would like to be available for people who want to talk to me whenever they want to talk to me. I would like to, but that's not realistic. So I have to have boundaries, meaning I can only do it at this time, for this length of time. I'm available in this window, right? So you don't must do anything, and nobody else must do it either. Um, and so that's one self-defeating behavior, because when we think people must or we must, we put ourselves and others under so much pressure that it's impossible for us to deal with. So it's important to address that one. And number 5 is comparison. Comparison is a thing that people who experience childhood trauma and the low self-esteem and the low self-worth issues that sometimes is a feature. Comparison is a big problem. When you compare yourself with others, I'm not sure who is the author of this quote that says comparison is the thief of joy. And it really does, because when you're comparing yourself to other people, then you're always going to feel not enough, because there are always going to be people who are at different positions to you, at different life stages to you, have different things than you do, have different qualities. Notice I'm saying different, not better, just different qualities, different everything, doesn't make them better. And when we are people who are trapped in comparison, feel like other people are better than, and that feeling of better than reinforce the low self-esteem that inevitably happens, because you feel everybody's better than you. Nobody is better than you. People are different, but not better than. Okay. So that's number 6. Number 7 is self-criticism. So if you're comparing yourself to other people, you're going to not be thinking kindly about yourself. So there's a lot of self-criticism of how you look, how you are, how you dress, how you perform, how you function, how you talk, how you think, how you walk. And, sometimes that's an internal thing that's going on, this self-criticism that's relentless, that impacts the depression if it's there, impacts the anxiety if it's there, impacts the low self-esteem, reinforce the shame, and reinforce all those negative thought patterns. When we practice self-criticism, as I said, it reinforces those negative patterns. And so that's one self-defeating behavior that really needs to go. When you can have a healthy view of yourself and the mistakes that you make, and you can hold that with grace. You can offer yourself grace, so you're not trapped in a pattern of self-criticism, of reinforcing the not good enough views that you have of yourself and the low self-esteem. You can tell yourself, as I said, hold yourself with grace. You can acknowledge the mistake that you've made. You can learn from the mistake. You can change from the mistake. You can grow through the mistake. But when we practice self-criticism, we're reinforcing views, and those self-defeating behaviors keep us trapped in a place of negative self-talk, and it perpetrates the pain, and it doesn't help us heal. Another self-defeat, number 7, is refusing help, not wanting support. I talk about this here a lot, where people who experience trauma have this thing about support, where it's very difficult to accept support. Support is important. We're not an island. None of us are. We need each other. And we use and access support in order to help us to be better, in order to help us to grow. So that's the beautiful thing. And I like to say, no one is an island. None of us are. We can't exist on our own. We can't work on our own. Absolutely nobody can. We need other people to reflect things to us, to feed things back to us, and to help us to grow. And when we refuse support, then that's one of the things that is an impact. I'm going to give a bonus one, and this is for people who experience sexual trauma mostly, where there's risky sex. That is one self-defeating behavior. And in this search for love, in the search for closeness, in the search for companionship and care, and all of those things, people tend to engage in risky sex sometimes, putting your life at risk sometimes, putting yourself at risk sometimes, and it's reinforcing again the low self-esteem. It's reinforcing the not good enough message. It's reinforcing those negative thoughts about yourself, and it will reinforce the comparison, the self-criticism, the disqualifying the positives. That one has the potential to reinforce all the others that I've just said. So if you see yourself in this at all, I would really suggest that you get help to understand your self-defeating thoughts. And of course, this list is not exhaustive. There's a lot more. But if you see yourself in this, get help to understand, what are my self-defeating thoughts? What are my self-defeating behaviors? How am I reinforcing this for myself every day? Or what are the things I can do to change? So how do you stop them? How do you stop self-defeating thoughts? Number one, the first thing to do is to recognize them. Awareness, self-awareness is the first place, the most important place, because we can't change what we're not aware of. And we also can't change what we don't own. So when you recognize the behavior, find a context for the behavior. So I've put the self-defeating behaviors in this frame of, my mind just went blank, in this frame of childhood trauma. Because over the years of working with people who have experienced childhood trauma, I hear these self-defeating thoughts, see the behaviors. So that's the context, that's the frame. Put them in perspective. If you're engaging, for example, in comparison, and you're comparing yourself with others, what's the context? What's the root? What is it that you experienced that puts you in that place? Were you bullied? Were you put down? Were there people in your life who never celebrated you? Were you told that you're not good enough and you'll never amount to anything? So that would be your frame. That would be your context. Put it in perspective, right? And when you put it in perspective, get help. You might need help to put it in perspective. You might watch this video, recognize those things, and realize that you need help. When you recognize it, get help. If you can't put it in perspective and context for yourself, get some help to do it. I was speaking at a conference last week on the impact of childhood trauma on mental health. And, there's a few women who came up to me to say, I experienced sexual abuse. I'm ready to get help now. 40 or 50 odd years. But it's okay. It doesn't matter what time, how old you are. As long as you make a decision, as long as you know and you see yourself in this message, in these self-defeating thoughts, repeating this pattern and this behavior, it's never too late to get help. And there are people who can help you, right? So thank you for joining me. I'm going to be here tomorrow. I'm not quite sure yet what the title will be, but it's going to be something that is going to help you to begin to move the needle from one place to the next, so you can start the journey of healing right here on this page. Take care. Have a great day.